Then, I'm Fikry Ananda, and I'm here with my teammates. They are Alfaqah Dwi and Nurul Maghfirah. In this occasion and great opportunity, we are going to explain about the history of the establishment of Organization of American State. And then, with the systemic level of analysis, it will be more focused on the neo-realist perspective. However, this presentation will be divided into two parts. The first part will be the history of establishment of Organization of American State, and the second part will be the systemic level of analysis, which rely on the neo-realism theory. So hopefully you are enjoying our presentation. So the first explanation is about what is exactly Organization of American State. Organization of American State is the one of the largest multilateral organization in the Western Hemisphere. This organization composed of every country in the North, Central, and the South America, with the exception of Cuba. The organization focuses on four broad objectives. The first one is democracy promotion. The second is human rights, and the third is economy and social development, and the last one is regional security cooperation.
According to neo-realism, there is two factors that influence the establishment of an institution, which are first, pressure from political power from other states to force them to create its own bloc. The second is the role of hegemonic state. For these two factors, we will discuss future, the correlation and evidence later. For the history of Organization of American States, we are going to bring you back to when American continent was founded. American continent used to be colonized by European superpower back in 18th century. The story begins when Christopher Columbus had a mission to expand Spain's prosperity. He was ordered by Queen Isabella from Spain to sail on the east, but unfortunately he is not arriving in the east, but he arrived in an unknown continent. Columbus blown away the major advantage that he could get in American continent. When he back to Spain, he told the people in Spain that actually there is an undiscovered continent on the west. The story spread rapidly on the Europe, and a lot of European superpower at the time compete to get more land on the American continent. France also sent its troops to the American continent to compete with the other European countries. There are also several people from the Great Britain who moved to American continent because they don't really like the system of their country, and also they want to find a new life where they could practice that what they believe. Mostly English colonized believe in Protestant, and it's hard for them because the royal family on the Europe at the time is Catholic. Next.
Then the next one is about the 7 Years' War. It was happened in 1756 until 1763. As one really think and believe that everyone will do anything in order to achieve their self-interest. And also for France, Spain, and Britain, they compete with each other in order to trying to be the most influential colony in the region. Of course, it meant the exacerbation for both of the parties, and finally, it led to the 7 Years' War. Finally, France surrendered in 1763. The war lasts 7 years. That's why it's called by the 7 Years' War. And in this war, the result of this war is the Great Britain become the winner and the France become the loser. It means France have to give its rest area of colony in the American continent to the Great Britain.
The next is post 7 Years' War, when the Great Britain's economic crisis. During the 7 Years' War, the Great Britain maximized their power. They do anything to support the British people in the America continent in order to conquer France and become the most influential country in America continent. However, after the Great British people succeed to conquer French colony, and expand its colonies in America continent, the Great Britain is facing a terrible economic condition because they send a huge amount of money in order to win the 7 Years' War. The Great Britain began to stress out and made several policies to its own colonies in America continent. Great Britain is asked them to pay tax for several export and import, and also the Great Britain colonies only could buy a product from the Great Britain itself.
Now we're gonna talk about the Great Britain colonies in America continent is not obedient towards its own government. As my teammates already mentioned before, that after the 7 Years' War, the Great Britain government is experiencing crisis. And in order to overcome the crisis, the Great Britain government is made a policy to impose the tax to its own colonies in America continent, and also trying to monopolize its economy by prohibits them to buy product from another states except from the Great Britain itself. Of course, the Great Britain's colonies in America continent is not agree with the policy that had been made by its own government. So, why? Because, as I have mentioned before, that the Great Britain colonies in America continent is not a part of the Great Britain government. The Great Britain colonies in America continent is a bunch of people who is not agree with the system of the Great Britain. The Great Britain colonies in America continent is opposing the monarch system. So in order to practice what they believe, they sail to the American continent in order to establish a new life, in order to practice what they believe. And after they establish a new life in the American continent, they could finally establish their own ideology, which is based on freedom and social justice for all. But because the Great Britain colonies in America continent opposed the policy that had been made by the Great Britain's government, the Great Britain colonies in America continent began to ignore what the Great Britain government told them and began to open rebellion to its own government. As I have mentioned before, that the Great Britain colonies in America continent started to open rebellion to its own government. But the American Revolution War began when the Great Britain colonies in America continent indicate their anger by dispose a huge amount of tea in the Boston Sea that owned by the Great Britain's government. Saying the Great Britain colonies in America continent began to open rebellion to its own government, the Great Britain's government sent a huge amount of its soil there to the American continent to attack its own colony. Responding to this war between the Great Britain's government and its own colonies, the three European superpower, France, Netherlands, and Spain, decided to becoming an alliance with the Great Britain's colonies in America continent instead of supporting the Great Britain's government. And with the help with these three European superpower, the Great Britain colonies won again its own government, and they finally gained its own independence. And during the Independence Day, they finally could destroy the King George statue as the symbol of their independence, and they could finally establish their ideology, which is based on the freedom and social justice for all. And also they include their ideology in their pledge of loyalty.
So after the Great Britain's colonies won the American Revolution War, they declared themselves as the United States of America. The Great Britain's colonies, or now we can call as the United States of America finally could realize their ideology, which is liberal democracy. They also established several fundamental human rights as well as their fundamental philosophy.
Now we're going to talk about the Monroe Doctrine. Monroe Doctrine is a crucial foreign policy that had created the Organization of American States. In the 18th century, even though the North America already gained its independence, but the South American nation is still suffer. Spain is still colonizing the South American nation and exploit the natural resources of the South American nation. So therefore, the United States of America under the James Monroe administration made a policy to help the South American nation to gain its independence. This foreign policy called the Monroe Doctrine. This foreign policy emphasized that the European colonization should stay away from the American continent and stop claiming and colonizing lands in the American continent. This foreign policy also emphasized that the United States would not tolerate any kind of colonization and puppet monarchy in American continent. This foreign policy also declared that any effort made by the European countries to invade more land would be considered as an act of aggression, and the United States of America would not remain silent. The United States of America will do anything in order to protect the American continent from the European colonization. The Monroe Doctrine succeeded to burn the spirit of South American region, to fight against Spain, to fight for their independence.
So the next one is about the independence of the South of American state. As what I have mentioned before, that South American states are inspired by the United States of America in order to fight against European power. The United States of America successfully had burned the spirit of the South American state to fight for their independence. In the Spanish-American War of the Independence, it proves out with the victory of the South American state with Spain or the Spanish. And this finally marked the end of the Spanish colonization in this region.
Now we're gonna talk about the manifest destiny. You might be wondering what is exactly the manifest destiny. So basically manifest destiny is the fate of American people, that American people were destined to expand its ideology and democracy across the world. American people strongly believe that it is their duty to spread their ideology, which is democracy, and form of foreign allies with diplomatic strategies. American people work so hard to achieve the goals of the manifest destiny, which is expand the liberal democracy across the world. The manifest destiny explains why the United States of America created Monroe Doctrine as a foreign policy to help the South American nation to gain its independence. As we know that every foreign policy has its own national interest, and the national interest of the America in the Monroe Doctrine policy is to spread ideology and democracy to the South American nation, in order to achieve the goal of the manifest destiny.
The next is the establishment of Organization of American States. The founding of OAS was based on the general acceptance of the principle of the U.S. Monroe Doctrine 2 December 1823 by the countries of the Western Hemisphere, especially the principles that an attack upon one American state would be considered as an attack upon all. The Organization of American States, or OAS, was founded on 30 April 1948 in Bogota, Colombia, which aimed to promote democracy, human rights, regional security, cooperation, economic and social development.
Now we proceed to the analysis part. In this section, we are going to analyze the Organization of American States in systemic level with utilizing the neo-realism perspective. As we have mentioned before, that neo-realism perspective perceives the establishment of institutions influenced by two factors, which are the first one is the pressure from external political power, and the second one is the role of the hegemonic state. Next, as we know that Organization of American States focus on democracy promotion and human rights protection through the continent and also defense alliance against the communist bloc. As you can see on the slide, we could conclude that the establishment of Organization of American States is influenced by the external political power. Why? Because we could clearly see that the establishment of OAS is happened because they have homogeneity. They experience colonization of European superpower. So therefore, they gathered together to establish an institution in order to cooperate with each other, to develop each other. And also, the establishment of OAS is also because of the pressure from the political power, which is the communism bloc, which is the East Bloc. Why the establishment of OAS is influenced by the communism bloc? Because we could clearly see that Organization of American States focus on the democracy promotion and human rights protection, which is really clash with the communism. So we could conclude that the Organization of American States is an anti-communism institution. As you can see on the slide, the establishment of Organization of American States is also influenced by the presence of hegemonic power. Who is the hegemonic power? The hegemonic power is the United States of America, which because we could clearly see since the Monroe Doctrine how the United States of America burned the spirit of South American nation to fight back against Spain, to seek for their independence. We could clearly see that the United States of America utilized the Monroe Doctrine to promote democracy and its ideology to South America. Another obvious evidence is because the Organization of American States focus on democracy promotion and human rights protection, which is one of the United States' interests. Therefore, we believe that the establishment of Organization of American States is influenced by the presence of hegemonic power, which is the United States of America. The United States of America established the Organization of American States in order to promote liberal and democracy, in order to achieve the mission, which is came from the Manifest Destiny, to expand democracy across the world. So the conclusion is the establishment of Organization of American States is influenced by two factors, which is the pressure from communist bloc, which is the external party here, and also the presence of United States of America, which is the hegemony here. Why the presence of United States of America is influenced the establishment of the Organization of American States? Because we believe that the United States of America utilized the Monroe Doctrine as a tool to shape its relation with the South American nation in order to promote the democracy and liberal and fulfill its manifest destiny. We could also clearly see that the ancestor of the United States of America came from the Great Britain colonies, who is opposing the monarch system, who left the Great Britain and moved to the Ananda continent, as we know today as the American continent, in order to establish their ideology, which is democracy and liberal, in the American continent without the interfere of the monarch. So we could conclude that the establishment of Organization of American States to promote democracy is based on the presence of hegemon power, which is the United States of America itself.
So that's all from our presentation. We are so sorry if we have a mistake. Thank you and good morning, Miss.